7 p.m. Tuesday, September 11th, 2018. I'd like to call the Selectmen's meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I go into public forum, I'd like to share a moment of silence to remember police, fire, EMTs, and victims of the 9/11 tragedy 17 years ago. Thank you. Next on the agenda is public forum, limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. Is anyone here for public forum? Next would be the minutes of the Board of Selectmen meeting on August 21st, 2018.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from our August 21st meeting as presented.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Also, executive session minutes for August 21st, 2018.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion not to release the executive session minutes until the issue has been resolved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Next would be a public hearing, poll hearing, Putnam Hill Road and Bolster Road. Wendy, would you read the notice, please?
Absolutely. Excuse me. I apologize. As advertised in the August 23rd, 2018 Millbury Sutton Chronicle, public hearing notice. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 166, Section 22, you are hereby notified that a public hearing will be held at 7:00 p.m. on Tuesday, September 11th, 2018, in the Sutton Town Hall upon petition from National Grid for permission to install one SO pole on Putnam Hill Road, beginning at the point approximately 1,200 feet northwest of the center line of the intersection of Bolster Road and Putnam Hill Road, and continuing approximately 15 feet in a northerly direction. National Grid to install one new 40C2 pole 99-50 and an anchor in the public way to help service 274-284 and 286 Putnam Hill Road. Also for permission to lay and maintain underground laterals, cables, and wires in the above or intersecting public ways for the purpose of making connection with such poles and buildings as the petitioner desires for distributing purposes. Plan file herewith marked number 26446086.
I would like to open up the public hearing, and a gentleman from National Grid, would you come forward, please?
So we were talking about it a few minutes ago. Does everybody want me to explain a little bit more of what we're doing over there?
For the public,
Yeah,
sure.
please.
That's fine, sure. So
Just want to
basically,
make sure
Can you-
you're just speaking into the mic.
Yep, sorry
Could
about
you introduce yourself for the,
that. My name is Mel Harvey. I work for National Grid.
Welcome back.
And what we're trying to do over here is service 3 properties, and we're trying to put a pole in between poles 99 and 100 to service all 3 properties directly in a straight line, because we have to put another pole inside the property, and we couldn't do it from the other 2 poles. The angles were too hard. So we're gonna put one pole in the middle between these 2 poles and service all 3 lots from that.
Okay. And I'll open it up for the board members. Dave?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there actually an intersection of Putnam Hill Road and Bolster Road?
This is not an intersection, no. This is, just the long road down there. There's nothing there really. There's some farmland across the street. I think some other houses were built, maybe a year ago over there. But other than that, it's pretty much wooded.
I guess I'm asking, when I looked on the map, I didn't see an intersection. I just didn't know if that affected the legal description at all, or if it's a drawn intersection and if the road doesn't extend that way.
On my sketch, and I never put any intersections, so it's pretty straightforward.
Right.
There was no intersections there.
I mean, honestly, other than that question, highway police, fire are all signing off, I really don't have any questions, so fine.
Yeah, I pre-marked it and everything for them, okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, similarly.
Jesse?
Highway, police, fire have signed off, so I really have no concerns. I know it's just a formality, but.
No, I understand, thank you.
Wendy?
No questions, Mr. Chair, thank you.
And I have no questions other than being a lifelong resident in Sutton, Polster Road was a dead end to come in from Lackey Road at one time, and it was always through the maps, but it never had no road going from Putnam Hill Road in extending it. So I don't believe it's a full road that goes from Lackey Road to Putnam Hill.
Yeah.
And I have no other further
Could
questions.
be in the assessor's map, is this?
Yeah, it might be a paper
Maybe
road of
street
some
light.
sort, yeah.
Having no other questions, I would like someone to read the motion.
Should we declare the
Ma-
public hearing closed?
Closed.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve poll hearing number 26446086 from Ngrid as advertised in the August 23rd, 2018 Millbury Sutton Chronicle.
Second.
The motion's been read and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, have a good evening.
You too.
Next on the agenda would be the appointment to the Conservation Commission and ZBA. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you're aware, we have a vacancy on the Conservation Commission. Dan Maroney has resigned and is now traveling and enjoying his life. We posted this position as required by the town bylaws. We had one applicant, and Mike McGovern. Mike currently, most recently served on the zoning board for a number of years, and would like to serve on the Conservation Commission. This is a Board of Selectmen's appointment solely. In addition, I'd like to recommend appointing associate member of the zoning board, Chris Matera, to a full member. The board appointed him to associate member maybe a year ago, so we didn't invite him here tonight, just to bump him up from associate to full. I'd like to thank Dan Maroney for his years of service, not only to the conservation, but also to the planning board as well.
Thank you. Mr. McGovern, would you just state your name and tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Mike McGovern. Been in town 10-plus years, 13, close to 13 actually. I did serve on ZBA. I was currently in my third term when I resigned to hopefully achieve this position. You can only hold one. I've been in construction for 30-plus years. I have a lot of knowledge of blueprint reading and the process that the Conservation Commission will help the townspeople through. So I do think I would have a lot to offer as far as understanding, what's ahead of the folks in town.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to point out Jim's introduction, which said that Dan has left Concom and is now enjoying his life. If that means
Yeah,
anything
not to
you.
say that,
It was pretty full here.
Just what motivates you to move from one to the other?
Well, ZBA is one time a month. It's not as big a commitment. I think that conservation's an opportunity to give a little bit more of my time. I'm in town all day. Not sure of all the processes, but I think there's site visits during the day that have to take place to keep things moving along, and inspections of sites. I work for myself, I'm self-employed. So I have the freedom to just do a little bit more, and conservation's a little bit more of a commitment than ZBA, I think,
Okay.
of time. So I think I can make a difference.
Great. Certainly your background seems to, really apply to either one of those. I would think so.
I did enjoy ZBA, it's a great board.
Good. So I don't know if this is going to come back around to me, so I want to take the opportunity to thank Dan. And every time this comes up, for me, it's an opportunity to thank everybody that volunteers in town. We couldn't run the town without volunteers, so we appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike, thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate your interest. To Dave's point, you know, getting people to volunteer for these very important roles is huge, and I applaud you for not only your service on ZBA, but your willingness, you know, to move over to Concom. Concom, as I'm sure you know, it's definitely very important. And I remember when Mr. DeWolf, who's behind us in the audience tonight, when he came before us, he mentioned that, you know, it was a tough board to go before. So the fact that you have years of experience in construction and understand the process is definitely beneficial. So, and also the fact that you have time, you know, that's huge as well. I do definitely have a couple of questions for you, though, if you don't mind me asking. One of which is, you know, Sutton, I think, is one of the few communities that actually has a series of local bylaws in terms of conservation. What's your opinion of that?
I'm still trying to understand it all. I've read through it all quite a few times. I've had the file under it. It can be complicated. There's a lot to understand. My opinion of the bylaws.
Do they serve a role? Do you think maybe they go a little too far? Maybe they're a little too lenient?
I think they're on the stricter side. I think there's always room for improvement in anything that all of us do.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't want to comment too heavily this early into the game. I try not to form too much of an opinion until I would fully understand it, which would come with years of being on the board. So for now, I would abide to the bylaws of the town.
I
I would have to say they're good laws.
I appreciate that. I tried, you know, thumbing through them myself over the years, and I'm sure you were able to get through it a little more easier than I was, so I appreciate that. We have before us a pamphlet that I think was given by the chair of the Conservation Commission in regards to training courses. I don't think it's a requirement, but would you have any interest in pursuing those to maybe help your understanding?
We'll see as time goes on. I wouldn't make that commitment any more than the commitment I'm undertaking now, but I'm always up for learning.
Okay. Just speaking for myself, Selectmen, Massachusetts offers Selectmen training, and I was able to attend one of those early on, and it definitely is an eye-opening experience. I think these are probably, again, more technical than anything we received, but, you know, the willingness to learn, I think, is always beneficial. And of course, if you get a greater understanding, if you could share that, you know, send some my way, I'd appreciate that. Last but not least, and this is a tough question, but I think it needs to be asked, is, as you mentioned, you know, you are in construction and you do a lot of business in town and you do wonderful work. But I'm assuming there may be instances when there may be conflict of interests that arise. How would you handle that situation?
Well, easy to answer, being on ZBA for probably 7, going on 8 years, I think. It's been a while, 6, shouldn't quote a year, I'm not sure. And I've had a few conflicts over the years, and I recuse myself, and I either leave the room or sit quiet in the audience and don't participate in any of the discussion or the public hearing.
Perfect. That's all I was looking for. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Jesse hit on some really good questions, so thank you. And I don't have any more specific questions, but I do just want to reiterate the board's thanks for you volunteering your time. It can be a thankless job, and good luck, and be careful what you wish for, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Couple of minor things. We're one of the very few that has the 200-foot setback in the wetlands district. So maybe that's something to think about. And number 2 is when people are invited to come to the meeting with their attorneys and representatives, it would be nice if they read the packet a little bit more and had some of the questions answered, because it makes it easier for you as board members and for our engineer if the other side was a little bit more prepared. So you might want to be able to share your knowledge of educating some of them, that it makes the process go a lot more smoother, and the time length is cut down dramatically. So, thank you. Anything else? Anyone from the public? Hearing none, we have a motion.
Chairman, I move to appoint Michael McGovern to the vacancy left by Dan Maroney on the Conservation Commission with a term to expire June 30th, 2019.
Second?
Motion been made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Have
you.
a great night.
Good luck.
You too.
Thank you.
And we also have a appointment to the ZBA. Christopher Matera, would you come forward? Not
No,
here.
he's not here tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, he was appointed a year ago by the board as an associate member, and we didn't invite him here tonight. He's just being promoted from associate to a full member. But he's been on the board, he understands the process at this point.
Yeah, and he did come in at one other time,
He
I
did,
remember.
he's been here before.
Can I make a quick comment, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly.
I just, just pointing out what's obvious in this case is that the move that we have now to have associate members of these various boards, where that's appropriate, really is, it is important, like the opportunity for Chris or whomever
Yeah.
to have sat on this board for, a year or so and become familiar with its operations allows them to hit the ground running and really understand what they're doing as they get to the board. And it's really helpful to these boards to have people that know what's going on and know the process and are familiar with it. So, just wanted to note that.
And of course, since we have our charter revision, we all now have the capacity to appoint associate members to all the boards. So-
Up to three.
So hopefully that if there's anyone who's in the viewing audience that have any interest on serving on any of the committees, just because the committees are full, don't hesitate, come down to town hall, fill out a letter of interest.
Volunteer action
Yep,
form?
volunteer action form, and, there will be openings for associate members.
Yeah,
And we haven't been doing it that long, and yet we've had several people get promoted. So
That's right.
it's really been valuable, I think.
Anything else? We have a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to appoint ZBA Associate Member Christopher Matera to the seat left vacant by ZBA Board Member Michael McGovern with a term to expire on June 30th, 2021.
Second.
Motion's been made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Next would be the conservation restriction deed. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have before you tonight a conservation restriction deed that needs to be signed by the Board of Selectmen. It will be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. So when the board signs this deed restriction, it would be, the control of the deed restriction will be passed on to the Conservation Commission. We have a similar arrangement with Waters Farm, where the Board of Selectmen signed the conservation restriction and turned over management of that conservation restriction to the Conservation Commission. Very similar arrangement. We had a development on Manchog Pond at 198 Manchog Road. The Conservation Commission felt that mitigation would be to provide a certain parcel of land that would remain in place, protected, and provide some additional open space and all natural habitat. The builder, the owner of the property, agreed with the Conservation Commission, and now it's up to the board to sign this and give control over this deed restriction to the Conservation Commission.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess not so much questions, observations. So this is a negotiation between the parties to set aside some land, and it's deeded in, so it stays with the deed as long as, I assume, this house is on the property,
Yes.
to essentially trade for a house lot to then also have conservation land available and set aside. So to me, it sounds like really good interaction, a really good sort of public-private partnership to preserve open space. So
Right.
I'm all in favor. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jesse?
Yep, I only have one question, and I'm scrolling through it, trying to see it, but maybe I can put Andy on the spot. I see that Concom signed off on this completely?
I don't think we're able to completely sign off until you sign off. That's how the procedure was explained to me. I
Okay.
don't think we can do anything until it's through the Board of Selectmen.
All right, did you guys, have a vote. Were you in favor of this?
I believe that we passed the order of conditions, but we had this, that conservation restriction or whatever, formality is, has to go before you before it comes back to us. So
Okay.
I don't think that they can start the project until this is done.
Wonderful.
Is my understanding.
Okay, yep, no, that's fair. Thank you. I have nothing else. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wendy?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
And I don't have any also. We have a motion on the floor, though.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the conservation restriction deed for 198 Manchog Pond Road, Sutton, Massachusetts.
Second.
Motion been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Next would be the draft fall town meeting warrant and sign the October 2nd election warrant. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a number of articles to go through here. I think there's 20 actually, 20 articles. The first few are revoting the budget that was passed at the last May's town meeting. And I'm gonna have Tim walk through the first couple of articles, and I'll interject. You wanna go through Article 1, Tim?
Sure, thank you. We've done this in the past. Once the state passes their budget, we revote the budget for state aid. Generally, the first line, it says decrease, raise, and appropriate revenue from state aid. There should be brackets around that. That's a negative. It's a decrease. So the net effect of Chapter 70 going up for the school, plus cherry sheet charges increasing on the town side, end up with a net decrease of 6407 from what we budgeted and voted back in May. And then, you know, at this point in the current fiscal year, I've been able to identify some items that looks like the budget should be changed from what we anticipated back in February, March, April, we voted in May. Veterans benefits, there's already been one or two individuals that have come on the rolls. We're gonna need another $22,000. Some wages, some of it had to do with the union contract being voted late, and a couple clerical errors that we've identified early. Cable access, if you recall, back in July, we had to transfer some money to cover their deficit as a result of health insurance. So I'm asking to take care of this now. And then internet is actually our iCloud storage, which we have not paid for a number of years. Clerical error on the vendor side. So this is what it will cost us per year. And it was
Going
not
forward.
budgeted for in fiscal 19. So taking care of a few things that now, while we have the opportunity, taking all that money from local receipts. We have enough local receipts to, you know, our actual versus budget. I'm very comfortable with increasing our local receipts. Local receipts are motor vehicle excise, inspection fees, those type of things. So the net, we're changing the budget, $53,304.
Could I just ask one question? iCloud, is that for the schools or townwide?
It's for the town. It's actually free for the schools.
Okay.
But the town has to pay. We haven't received a bill from the vendor since 2015.
I like that math.
And we just, you know, I don't know that we ignored it, but we just didn't pay any attention to it because we never received a bill. And then they caught up with it. They admitted it. It was their error. And this is the price going forward.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It's actually like a couple $1,000s more, but we have money in the internet budget to cover the variance.
Can I ask a question? So what happens to the money that was due for 16 and 17?
They lose out on that.
Okay.
Yeah, they've agreed to not,
Back bill us
Right.
for that amount.
Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one quick question on this. Tim, what if we decided to not do this now? I mean, this kind of adjustment now? There's no, we don't have to, right? These kinds of things could wait until
well,
the end of the year?
yes and no. The school piece, we've always promised them that they get the Chapter 70 money. So we'd have to revote to give them this 13,980. So as long as we're doing it, we may as well
Clean up some things
give a
we
few
know about.
things. So
We have
it's
the money in the
less, I
budget,
had to
so
come
why not?
back to in next July and ask for some year-end transfers.
Okay, that was just a curiosity question, so.
Article number 2, refresh your memories. We have a few policies in place. One of them is regarding the cell tower rental on
Town Farm
Town
Road.
Farm Road. That's in their OPEB funding policy. Whatever we get as determined by the town accountant at year end, we'll take that amount and appropriate as free cash to the OPEB trust fund. Same thing with free cash. The policy indicates 10% of certified free cash would go in to the OPEB. And then there's also a provision for overlay. So those three pieces will be, determined prior to town meeting, and we'll have a dollar amount. I mean, I already have a number, but,
Rough estimate
Yeah.
at this point.
I mean, if I can tell you if it's up to Jim.
I'd rather wait if we
Yeah.
could,
Yeah.
until the numbers
As long as we
become.
have a system in place,
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, and the whole idea is, for the OPEB funding policy, these are one-time revenues. Free cash, the cell tower revenue, I guess, is recurring, and then the overlay. These are, one-time monies, other than the cell tower revenue, which the board decided to dedicate to the OPEB liability, so.
And I think that's sound, because I know when I first got on the board, we were just coming off of using one-time revenues.
Right.
So I think this is a nice, safe account to place it in, because obviously we have a liability with OPEB.
Right.
So anything that we have that we can put into it, we're being responsible.
You got it.
And the auditing people like this
They do.
measure that we've done, and that's a plus for us to look ahead at our AA+ standard
Yeah,
bond rating.
yeah, you're right.
And to be clear, these are policies, they're not requirements.
That's correct.
And so we have the discretion to not do this if we find ourselves in a position that would suggest that we shouldn't, for whatever reason. Although, certainly, I'm not aware of anything that would make that suggestion at this time, but
No,
nonetheless.
me either, and Jim will tell you, I'd be the first one that would tell him or suggest to him not to do something if I wasn't comfortable with it.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Let's see.
Article number 3 is the bad bill provision, paying prior year invoices. The only bad bill we have, I think, is from Beta, is sewer department,
Yes.
for INI. They did some work that ended up costing another $17,000. The idea is that the sewer department will pay this bill out of retained earnings. So there's really no fiscal impact on the town budget, but I think that's the only bad bill we have, the prior year invoice.
Good.
Article number 4 is to appoint an additional member on the Board of Selectmen to the Police Station Building Committee. Obviously, we have the chairman of the Police Station Building Committee, Wendy Mead, now on the Board of Selectmen, and it's appropriate to have this voted on, even though the police station is, probably 6 months or 4 months from being completed. But I think it's, we have a town meeting, we might as well do it to make it clean. Article number 5.
Number 5, we also have a special education tuition stabilization fund funding policy, which the goal was to get that fund up to $350,000. So this article, we're asking to transfer from free cash, an additional amount that'll get us up to that level. We have $200,000 in there right now. We'll be asking for another $150, get us to the $350,000.
New growth, right?
Yeah, well, you're right. This one's gonna come from new growth, but still the same, accomplishing the same goal, getting to the 350. Yeah, this is gonna be the new growth, so it'll be raise and appropriate from real estate taxes.
Now that we're getting to the point of reaching the set goal, have the schools had to draw on this at all, up to this point?
No. And I think they have plenty of money in
School
This is
choice and
school
circuit
choice.
breaker.
circuit breaker monies, which is generally for, out-of-district special ed costs. So, we continue to monitor this, and I encourage Ted and the school department to look towards those revenues rather than looking to this. This is a break glass in case of emergency kind of fund, and I hope it's not used. I hope we go and continues to be there, just in case, we have a sudden influx of special ed students, out-of-district placements, that weren't budgeted for in the previous fiscal, or the current fiscal year,
And should the day come, what's the process for using the money? Who?
It's a stabilization fund. It requires both the town manager and the school superintendent to make a recommendation to the various boards, school committee and the Board of Selectmen, to place on town meeting warrant to withdraw some monies depending upon the amount. And it's a 2/3 vote needed from town meeting. So there are some protections. The superintendent can't just access this money. He needs the town manager's approval. So if the two of us agree or the two individuals in those seats agree that it's needed, we then present to our various boards. If the boards agree, then we go to town meeting for a warrant question, and it requires a 2/3 vote of the town meeting.
And should there be a day when you want to use money from the OPEB trust fund, it would be a similar kind of thing? It'd have to go to town meeting for a vote?
No,
Because that's not a stabilization fund.
correct.
Okay.
So that would be more of I guess the OPEB board would have to be willing to start that process of working with the town manager that's in place to start moving some of the retiree health costs from the town's budget and paying it out of the OPEB trust.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
And we'll talk about that later when we do the budget this year, because we have talked about that. We're not looking to do that in the next couple of years, but at some point in time, we may look to use some of those revenues in the OPEB trust to fund current retiree benefits. But it'll only be the interest. It'll continue to grow over time until, 30 years down the line.
But as a side note, I know it's only September, but we'll be having the next OPEB committee meeting end of January, beginning of February. And at that time, we're planning on inviting our new actuaries to make a presentation. Those are, that's one of the many questions I'm sure we'll throw out at them. I think what we're going to do is invite any of the Finance Committee members and Board of Selectmen members to sit in on that meeting if they'd like to hear the discussion.
Because I'm sure it will be an exciting meeting.
Actuaries always are.
Article 6 is to get town meeting authorization to dispose of the material within the gravel pit located on Hatchery Road. Right now, there's a piece of land over there that we share with Aggregate Industries. It's a large hill, approximately 8 acres, and less than half is on Aggregate, and probably 55 to 60% is town-owned property. So it's kind of an interesting, challenging move, but I've been working with town council, and one of the first steps is to get town meeting authorization for the Board of Selectmen to lease and to sell the material on the land. That's required under Mass General Law, Chapter 30B, Section 16, disposition of real property. So I'm working through the process. I'll give the board a further update later on, but Tom McEnany has drafted this question, and we're making some progress on this. We've had some good contacts with Aggregate Industries, and we're now trying to reach out to an appraiser to value the property, which is also a requirement under 30B, Section 16. Article 7 is to get an easement on land that land in Manchog that connects the power to the communications tower on the Manchog Water Tower. So it's kind of complicated, but it's actually quite simple. There's a piece of land between the telephone pole where you get the power initially and the communications tower. Because we are running fiber from the town hall to the new police station down to Manchog, we need to bury some conduit and bring the electricity and the fiber to the communications tower. There is a piece of land. It's currently privately owned. We've had some discussions. It appears that Metacomet Land Trust is is looking to acquire that property. Probably within the next 30 days, will acquire that property. And then we will deal with Metacomet Land Trust to gain this easement, which the current owner is in Florida. Hopefully within the next 30, 45 days, we will begin negotiating with Metacomet. But again, it does require town meeting authorization to enter into an easement. It's a real property taking. Article number 8 is to see, it's really designer services for sewer from the villas to the center of town. We are looking to the sewer commissioner. Sewer commission has met. They have reviewed 2 bids on designer services, and the plan is to bring sewer from the villas up to the center of town. And obviously, town meeting would have to vote on appropriating the funds, which will come out of connection fees within the sewer department.
Right.
Which I don't know the balance, but it's probably $750,000 or more. Significant amount of revenue within that account, and right now we're looking at probably close to $100,000 for design on this project, this phase of this project. And then Article 9 is Jen Hager. This is the board sponsoring the article that eliminates the solar overlay district and reverts back to the 250 kilowatt in residential sections of this town. You want to comment any more on that?
We had a public hearing last night. I made adjustments to the articles in accordance with discussion at last night's meeting, as well as working with town council on a portion of one of the articles. So we do have the most up-to-date language, considering last night's hearing commentary. I also gave you the bylaw and article recommendation memo, which you're probably not used to seeing this early, but there you go. So 9, as Jim said, is the article the Board of Selectmen sponsored. The board did recommend that town meeting vote to approve that article. They came at it from a slightly different angle in that they consider it kind of a housekeeping article. Right now, the solar overlay district consists of one parcel off Purgatory Road that we know can't support a solar system. So, in the board's opinion, you really should just eliminate the district because it contains one parcel that's not functional for solar. So, they recommended that town meeting approve that article unanimously. And then you'll see Articles 10 through 13 are all articles, and I'll go through them, but they were articles that were brought to us by a landowner within the town who will shortly be a resident, who had petitions actually already signed to bring these to town meeting, but asked the board if they would sponsor the articles. The board had a lot of discussion on this and said, you know what, after the last town meeting, it's clear townspeople are interested in what goes on with solar, particularly in the residential districts, and we really think the planning board should sponsor these articles, in part because they support many of them, but in the least because they thought it was appropriate for town meeting to have the ability to have these discussions and have input on these issues. So Article 10, all Article 10 does is if Article 9 fails and or Article 9 passes, but at some future time somebody decides to come back in with an article to reestablish the overlay with some other parcel or parcels in it, all Article 10 does is say, if you're going to apply for a large ground-mounted permit in the residential or village districts, it also needs to get a special permit. So in addition to site plan approval, it also has to get a special permit. It's another layer of permitting. It doesn't add time because they're both in front of the planning board. But what it functionally does is, say a project comes in and it is denied, the special permit, as you know, is a much broader criteria. It makes the board's decision to deny an application actually more easily defensible if they find there's a reason why a particular installation should not be permitted. So it strengthens our position legally, and it adds an additional layer of permitting and protection for any installations if they're ever allowed in the residential or village areas. So that was voted, that was recommended unanimously by the board as well. Article 11 basically is housekeeping to go with Article 10. When you look at the use table, you need to see what uses are allowed and by what mechanism. So all Article 11 does is add a footnote, basically, that says if you're putting an installation in R1, R2, or V, you have to get a special permit. Now, if Article 9 passes, the planning board will just adjust their motion on this article because that footnote number 1 will have been eliminated with Article 9. So we'll just adjust our motion. We don't have to do anything crazy, just change the motion. I already addressed that with council. Article 12, the planning board actually voted unanimously to not recommend this article. And the discussion went that when you look at what was proposed here, the line of clearing, the wording was key. The line of clearing will be set back 100 feet from all lot lines. And then panels themselves and the fencing around the panels has to be pushed 200 feet from lot lines. Right now, if you have an industrial use like Prime Metals, that only has to be, or a Home Depot distribution facility, that only has to be 100 feet from a residential lot line. So why in the world would you say a solar installation has to be 200 feet? So when the board started kind of looking at it, they said, yeah, that makes no sense. It's a reaction to a lot of things that went on at the last town meeting, and they didn't necessarily consider it extremely sound planning. They talked about using different numbers, but frankly, they were just guessing at that point. So they said, you know what? No, we're going to recommend not to approve this. And they did look at the existing language and the additional safeguards they were putting in place with these articles and said, you know what? We think the bylaws will protect installations in the residential district if they ever occur again in the future. So Article 12, they recommended unanimously not to recommend.
Can I just ask a question on that?
Sure.
So I know this came to you from a petitioner, but the idea was the planning board was going to adopt them, and so why in this case would you just not put this on at all?
Sponsoring is different than recommending. Sponsoring means that you believe town meeting should have the ability to debate it. Now, during the public hearing, we had the person who was going to petition them sitting there, participating, having done quite a lot of background work on these articles, looking at, over 30 towns in the Commonwealth, really doing the work to come up with these articles. And the board at that point said, sponsorship, we really believe the town should be able to look at these and debate these. Recommendation is what we really think from a planning board standpoint, whether it should be in the bylaw or not. So we really don't think it should be in this format at this time. So we're gonna give that recommendation, but we'll allow town meeting to debate it. And at that point, as of last night, it would have been kind of disingenuous to tell a potential petitioner who had a valid petition ready to go in on time, but who held it back because the planning board agreed to sponsor the article, to basically pull the article. So the board thought that would be in bad faith to do that as well. Awesome. So that's the reason why they're not just planning on doing a no action motion. So the decision has not been made yet, and who will make the motion. So, because it would be weird for the planning board to make a motion of something they don't support. So we're still working out who would make this motion. And it may be that we'll come to an understanding with the potential petitioner, one who would have petitioned it, to in fact just pass over it.
Okay.
But, so that's a little mechanism. Timing, they really just didn't think it was fair to say, we'll support it, no, we're gonna pull it. So, that's what happened there.
Thank you.
Article 13 just puts in writing a requirement we already have, but that is not currently enforceable. Whenever an installation comes in, I request sightline representations and photographs. They're key to evaluating what you're really gonna see on any of these projects. But I can't force it. So, for instance, the 3 installations that went to town meeting, had they been filed with the planning board, I asked all 3 to give me sightline representations. Only one of them gave me sightline representations because I had nothing, I couldn't force them. It needs to be in the bylaw. It's key, and that's what this does.
Makes sense.
Okay, so that's it on solar. Do you have any questions on solar?
Nope.
All right, Article 14. If you've been here a while, you're gonna go deja vu, because this is our 4th or 5th attempt at the definition of lot widths. And as we do our job every week, particularly with commentary and review by our lead assessor, Nick Nunemacher, who is also, as you know, a registered land surveyor, we find all kinds of reasons why the definition of lot width we have just is horrible. So this, I intend to be my last definition of lot width ever. And we've made it as simple as possible. And Nick has worked with me on this definition, and we had quite a long discussion on such a simple definition. So this is, again, just trying to eliminate issues we've had with this definition. Article 15 is just bringing an existing section of the bylaw into conformance with current Mass General law on this subject. Mass General law used to say if you get a special permit to construct something or to establish a use, you need to do it within 6 months. The law now says 12 months. So this is housekeeping. We're just making the bylaws conform to Mass General law. Article 16, kind of the same thing as lot width, only this is the first time I've changed this definition in 20 years. Our definition of street is horrible. Town council had stronger words than that for it. So what we've done is just mirror Mass General law. So this, it's a constructed way as opposed to a paper street. And it's either A, B, or C. You will find the language A, B, and C almost verbatim in Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81L of the Subdivision Control Act. So that's kind of housekeeping, but it's dealing with issues we've had with the definition of street. Articles 17 and 18 were requested by Article 17 was requested by the building department. While I was fixing number 17, I noticed that number 18 is the same thing, essentially. Building department said, please take the fees out of the bylaw. The Board of Selectmen will still have to approve any change to the fees, but we really shouldn't have town meeting approving fee changes. That's just onerous. So while I was looking at that one, on the very next page, the fine structure was written in there. As you know, we have a non-criminal disposition bylaw. Fines are already thoroughly addressed in the general bylaw. So 18 just changes the wording on fines, referring to the bylaw that's already been established. So 17 and 18 are kind of housekeeping. 19, while we were doing prime metals, Nick Nunemacher pointed out that the bylaw right now says if you are an industrial lot in the OLI, Office Light Industrial District, and you're on a cul-de-sac, you only need 100 feet of frontage instead of 200. But it didn't address width. Lot width, per the table of dimensional regs, is in the same column as lot frontage. So the board could have made a finding that because they're both in the same column, they're one and the same. But that would have been tenuous. It would have left prime metals in a weird position where somebody could make an appeal. There would be a problem. And the board just thought it was sloppy. So they ended up changing their driveway to a definitive roadway subdivision. So they filed a private roadway. It eliminates the frontage issue and the lot issue. But the board said, it's a problem needs to be fixed, this fixes the problem. So you can still go to a lesser frontage. Your width will need to be a little bit wider because we don't want to encourage lots that go like this off a cul-de-sac. And we don't even want ones that kind of stay consistent, you know, it's just jamming more lots in. This already allows more lots than usual. They need to kind of skew out in this direction. So 125 was the number after I did lots of drawings and math. That worked for lot width. So that cures that issue. 20 is also an issue that came up with prime metals, and I want to be clear, we're not fixing the bylaw for prime metals or any one business. As we apply the bylaws, we often find issues with the bylaws. These bylaws have been changed pretty much every year I've been here, and not just for job security, but also because if you use them, you find issues with them. Though job security is definitely motivational. So what we found was the wording of the common drive bylaw clearly intended to allow common drives in both the residential districts and the business districts and industrial districts. However, when changes were made to affect that, there were sections where references to house were still in there, references to house lots or house numbers were still in there. So all of those references to houses needed to be cleaned up because we're talking about any structure, an industrial, a commercial, or a residential structure. So that's just a housekeeping issue. The planning board has had lots of common drive applications over the last many years. And it used to be, you could only have a common drive if you were trying to get around a wetland, if you were trying to deal with ledge issues, if there was a safety issue. They eliminated that some number of years ago. I can't remember if it was by petition or their idea, and now we see common drives for really kind of frivolous reasons. And while common drives seem really nice on day one when you're getting them approved, like a year or two or 10 down the line, somebody's a nightmare neighbor. And then we get dragged in either through the police department or some direction because everybody's arguing about who's maintaining the common driveway. So the board really feels very strongly, and they have proposed a change here to go back. You can only have a common drive if you're trying to get around a topographical issue. Otherwise, you have a single driveway like everybody else. So the good thing about that's not really punitive, it's actually kind of a gift. If you put in your own driveway, there's no requirement other than the apron that goes from the town, within the town right of way to your lot line, from our pavement to your driveway. Only that has to be paved if you're just putting in a driveway for your single family home. After that point, it can be gravel, it can be 2 feet wide, it can be 50 feet wide, doesn't matter. If you have a common driveway, as you know, drainage calculations, 15 feet of pavement, 18 feet cleared, underground utility, you name it. So the board really felt, no, these should only be allowed when they're really necessary, not on a whim. And so that's one of the major changes here. And then there were no different standards for construction for commercial and industrial drives. And the board said, that's crazy, why don't we do that? So these ones have a wider width for industrial and commercial drives and a larger construction standard in terms of base and top course. Number 12 is the one that town council got involved with. Right now, the bylaw says you can't ever ask for a common drive to be a public way. You can't do it. And you guys have to come to some agreement, we don't care what it is, but you have to maintain your common drive and you can't park on it. Because in effect, it's access for everybody who's inside that. You had to give before I would sign a building permit, you had to show me the deed to every lot serviced by it, where the restriction was in there. But when you think about that, particularly if you're a builder like the Romeos or the McGoverns, you may build out, you'll have a bunch of lots, you'll build out the houses and then you'll sell them. So getting me a deed for each individual lot with the restriction already in it is kind of a cluster. So basically, I reviewed that with council and he came up with this wording that basically says, you have to have the recorded restriction and the plan of the common drive, not a big old plan, just the 8.5 by 11 plan with the easement area that is applicable to this. You have to have that on record before we go from using it for one house to using it for more than one house. So when it is functionally a common drive at that point in time, so basically before you pull the second building permit in effect, or the second occupancy permit. So much better functionally, good idea on town council's part. So that's with that. All of these articles were recommended unanimously, except for the one I told you was not recommended unanimously. And the hearing was closed last night.
Thank you, Jen. Dave?
No, I addressed my questions as they come up, so I'm good, thank you.
That's it?
I have no questions, thank you.
I have no questions, thank you both.
And thank you for a wonderful explanation of all of this.
You're welcome.
And now we have a motion on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve and assign the October 2nd, 2018, hold on, so that's election warrant. Yeah,
We can vote on that, too.
Yeah, the draft warrant is just a draft. You'll sign that on October 1st,
Okay.
the next selectmen's meeting, but you do need to sign the election warrant tonight,
well, then, Mr. Chairman, if I may, could I continue, or reiterate the motion? All right, wonderful.
special election.
For the special election. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve and sign the October 2nd, 2018 election warrant.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next meeting, just read them all.
I know, right? I'll just start at the beginning and
Yes.
just go all the way through.
Good. Now we have the town manager's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sidewalks at the Early Learning Center. Strike three on this one. We didn't get any bids on this particular project. So we are looking at that. I think it might have just been too small of a project during a very busy construction season for roadways and streets and so forth. So what we're thinking about what we're going to do next. The bottom line is, one of those two parking lots need to be addressed at some point in time. Either the elementary school where the teachers park right across from the entrance, or the early learning center. So we're gonna work with the school department to determine what they feel is the worst one and the greatest need, and then we'll probably incorporate the sidewalk along with paving a parking lot, essentially. So it's a bigger project. At that point, it becomes $100,000 to $150,000, much more attractive to potential bidders versus a $60,000, basically handwork with concrete and asphalt. So, October special election will be held on Tuesday, October 2nd, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The three candidates are running for selectmen. They are Jonathan Anderson, Jeffrey Bannon, and Kyle Burgesson. Candidate introduction video. The cable department under Pam Nichols and Christine Hicks are working with the high school video production class to have the candidates for the special election record a video introduction. Each candidate will answer 4 to 5 separate questions, which will be provided in advance of the video shooting. It will be available on the local cable station, probably the Facebook page, and any other way, YouTube video, ways that we can get this information out to the voters. The revaluation process, we went out to bid for the 9-year reclassification and revaluation, cyclical reclassification. Vision Government Solutions won the bid for $72,000. We set aside $180,000 a couple of years ago in the capital plan. So we had more than enough money to complete that project. I still have to work with Joyce and the assessors to figure out how much of that $180,000 we need beyond the 72, because there are additional requirements that are implemented as a result of this process. So I'll get that information and then I'll let you know what we can release back to. I assume that money came out of free cash a couple years ago, because most of the capital plans over the last couple of years have been funded through free cash. Municipid, they closed on Friday, September 7th, last Friday. The town made $13,527 on the sale of 12 different items. A number of cable items did not sell. A lot of it was antiquated equipment that we've renewed and updated. We're going to see if there's some sort of specialized site that might deal with these types of items. But it's good news. We sold the forestry truck, 1975 forestry truck for $6,000. A number of vehicles that went for pretty good money. So the more and more we do Municipid, the more convinced I am that this is a much better site than the former practice that we used to have of advertising the local newspaper and, having one or two bidders for, $300 for a fire truck. It's just a much wider audience in over a number of different states that see these bids. And then Fall Town Meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 15th at 7 p.m. in the middle school auditorium. That's all I have for updates, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that'd be good. Next would be announcements. Or do you want to comment on Jim's?
Yeah. Mind if I do that?
Go ahead, yeah.
We're on TV, I got a chance to
I
talk.
want to get going because of the Red Sox game on, but yeah, go ahead.
All right,
Priorities.
I'll go quick, Mr. Chairman.
Just teasing.
So the sidewalks, you already said it, that's the project that won't get built, but I think, again, you keep going at it with new parameters, and we keep trying.
Yep.
So that's a good way. I really like the idea of a candidate introduction video, and, I think we had some questions about conflicts about who could do this before, but that's obviously been cleared, and this is all good, so that's a great idea. Just, on the revaluation thing, it's pretty obvious when you present it this way that that's a nice little, budget return. I guess I was surprised. I assumed it would go right back into the capital stabilization plan, but you
It
think
depends on
where the funding
where
was?
the initial funding source came from.
Okay.
My belief is the last couple of capital plans have come funded through free cash versus the capital stabilization fund.
Okay,
If it was funded originally through the capital stabilization fund, that money would go back into that.
yeah. Okay, that makes sense. On the municipal stuff,
Yeah.
Again, the result's been great. Creative way to do it. Have we had any problems collecting from these people? I mean, everybody pays and comes and gets their stuff. I mean, how do they make payment to the town?
They submit a bank check to Deb, and she collects the money. We did have maybe one or two individuals that didn't come and collect the items that they had won, and we reported them to the Municipid organization. They have been banned from the site. They can no longer bid. And so there are corrective measures in place, but unfortunately we didn't sell that item and we had to go out to bid in a future auction for those items. But pretty much everything that we've had on auction has sold, except most recently the cable items that are somewhat
Understandable.
out of date type items.
Okay.
VCR type equipment.
Sure. Great, and thank you for the update. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be quick as well. Going to the reevaluation with the process vis-a-vis the assessment. I've had conversations with Joyce, and this is just kind of like a warning to the community that this is coming, and this is gonna impact our property taxes, because they're coming and they're gonna reevaluate all individual parcels in town. So it's not like the town is increasing your property taxes to be malicious. The state comes in, they set a number, and that's what we'd have to adhere to. So the only thing I would ask is, as that gets closer, at some point, we take opportunity just to remind the community that it's coming, so that way there's not that sticker shock when the first bill comes in.
What's nice, though, is that we do these annual mini revals on an annual basis, so we keep up with the property value, so there probably won't be a major sticker shock now. The one downside of this reclassification, cyclical, is that we go essentially door to door. And if you don't let the assessors get access to your property, you also then can no longer file an abatement on your property taxes. So whatever the taxes are, that's what you're stuck with unless you let them into your house and give them access to your property. So there is a downside for not giving access to the assessors, rights to to view your property.
And they're pretty efficient and they're quick.
They are.
Can I just ask a question on that topic?
Sure.
I didn't mean to take your time, but.
No, be my guest.
But as I understand it, our total tax levy doesn't change through this process at all, right? So
That's
really,
correct.
all it comes down to is how your particular property might change in value relative to either your neighbor's property or other properties, or, for example, if there were, not that we have much, but if there was a significant change in valuations of commercial properties relative to residential properties, then that could adjust the kind of overall split.
Yep.
But overall, if your house has gone up in value, but it's gone up in value pretty much in line with how everybody's house has gone up in value, then it really doesn't change your overall tax bill anyway. It's only if maybe they had, you finished a basement and nobody knew about it, and now your house is worth more,
Where you forgot
relatively
to
speaking.
pull a permit for that work, and then it was discovered upon the inspection.
But that is
That is true. The fact is, if everybody's property value goes up, then what happens is the tax rate goes down.
right.
So we collect the same amount of money, typically what we collect plus 2.5% every year. So that if the values go up across the board, then what comes down is the tax rate. So it's just a simple calculation. The variable is the tax rate. So if the values are high in a community, the tax rate is generally low. If the values are low in the property, you see the tax rate up in the $20, $30 area. Properties down on the Cape that are very nice properties, the tax rate is $4 per thousand. And then I can talk about some other examples, but I won't.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, no problem. The only other point that I have is I'd just like to thank Deb for her work with Municipid, because I know she puts a lot of effort in, but obviously we're seeing the return, so it's time well spent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wendy?
I just wanted to thank Jim for your industrious attempts to get that sidewalk done at the school. It always boggles my mind when nobody bids, but I guess that's a good reflection on the economy.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the upside.
Yeah.
But thank you for your report, and I appreciate all the information.
Thank you.
I'm all set also. Next would be Selectmen's Roundtable announcements.
Just two things really quickly, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Wendy, actually, for her invitation and from the whole committee to have us down at the police station for a tour.
Last Wednesday.
It was, when was that again? I have not really had a chance to be on site, so for me it was really informative and interesting to see. The builders involved are really great partners. It was really evident speaking with them. They knew this was not just people that know how to build things. They know how to build police stations particularly. And that was really evident, and you could just feel the value of having that kind of knowledge available to us for this project. So Wendy told me at the tour that, I think January we're hoping to have the station open, and she hopes to make some tours available to the public as well at that time. So thank you for the tour. I really enjoyed it. Tonight, we all had a chance to attend a 9/11 ceremony that was sponsored and coordinated from a high school freshman here in Sutton by the name of Will Edwards. And it was really a moving, touching ceremony, and just awesome to have put together by a high school freshman. I know some others want to talk about it, so that's all I'll say. But I want to congratulate Will and thank him for putting that together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, you mentioned Will's effort, so yeah, that was one of the things I was just writing down. In attendance, obviously, the board was there. John had an opportunity to speak, but also Senator Ryan Fapman was there, as well as members of the Sons of the American Legion, the Legion Riders, the Ladies Auxiliary, and of course, some Legion members as well. And also the Sutton Fire Department Honor Guard was in attendance as well. So there was some veterans there, there were residents there, and it was a nice gathering, just to kind of get together and commemorate the significance of this day. Speaking of the dud, I'd like to thank everyone who came to the chicken barbecue. It was a tremendous success. I think a record number of chickens was sold, the crowd was steady, and hopefully everyone had a good time. And I would like to put people out on notice. This Saturday, there's a couple of things going on in town. One is going to take place over at the First Congregational Church, down in the basement, Waters Farm. We're going to be peeling apples, getting ready for Apple Crisp for Waters Farm Days. So if anyone's good with an apple peeler, come on down and join us. The other event, there's going to be a town-wide yard sale sponsored by the Historical Society. There are going to be some tables over near the blacksmith shop, but I think there's a map that's going to be published, and there are going to be residents in the town that are going to be having yard sales. So hopefully weather will be nice and people have a chance to go around. And while you're out and about, you could also go up to the high school because there's a big football game. I will be there. I'll probably be on the dark side because that's where my son goes, but it's going to be a good football game, and who doesn't like a football game on a Saturday afternoon? And lastly, town election, October 2nd. Get out and vote.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, sir. Again, I just want to thank you all for coming last Wednesday to the tour. I think it was very informative, and, Matt from Tecton Architects is a great wealth of information on building these police stations, so we're very thankful for all of them. With regard to Will Edwards' event this afternoon, for lack of a better term, it was a very, very moving and touching ceremony for a very tragic event, and I was very impressed by the amount of people he got involved and how well he did it. And I think to show the respect from the town, I think it would be appropriate for the Board of Selectmen to send him a letter of thanks for organizing that event, if that's within our purview to do that.
Nice.
I think that would be a good recognition of his efforts going forward. So I'd like to propose that if we could do that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We should definitely do that.
And that is my last item.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of things. The cell tower, Jim, is up and running, and
That's correct.
I'm sure that a lot of people welcome that. I know I talked to some of the policemen and everything around Manchog Road and even down to the school and everything. They are having bars on their cell phones, so, I mean, I think that's a good thing. Is the boiler replacement completed?
The boiler in the elementary school they're working on it.
Okay.
That should be done within the next 30 days or so.
Oh, that's
So
great. Before
MPC received that bid. They are working on it currently, and
All done before the cold weather sets in.
it'll be done before the middle of October.
And Jim, I really want to thank you for the negotiations on the gravel permit. This has been a long, troublesome mediation between Aggregate and the town of Sutton, but it's time to get this done because of the worth that is there
Yeah.
and the need not to have gravel. Also, that's a big plus and a liability away from the town of Sutton.
Exactly.
Wendy, police station site visit, thank you very much. I did come to one conclusion, that it's a mini Alcatraz, and I think it's
No one's escaping.
very, very well designed. But what I was impressed with is the contractors themselves. They were upbeat. They couldn't wait to share their wealth of information because this is their first building in Massachusetts and they want to continue and get a good review. And from what I see now, from what they did there, observations is they are going to get some good reviews. So I think that's great. Cell tower, boiler, grant, police station, and the tribute tonight, commemorating 17 years ago, was really good for the town. And what I am very happy with also is the Legion itself, how they've all come together. And it's a place for the community to express some of their things, and it's a solid organization now, so we appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
To music too, that was impressive.
That timing was
Hey,
perfect.
great, you know?
I'm trying to turn it down before we started the meeting.